welcome to another episode of the Great Climate Change Challenge. I'm Gargi Rawat. In today's episode, we're going to talk about something we tend to overlook, food and agriculture. It's no surprise that climate change has an impact on farmers who've been dealing with eroding topsoil, extreme rainfall and droughts for more than a decade now. In fact, decades, one would say. One important factor in the agriculture sector is that crops in India are heavily dependent on rainfall and sources of water. However, climate change also affects the food on your table. Now consider the following. Climate change is not only making rainfall unpredictable, it's also increasing the demand in energy in both rural and urban spaces. With a rising population and increasing demand for a better lifestyle, the demand for electricity is going higher and higher. And this hike in demand affects basic needs like electricity bills and food. And this demand also increases transportation costs, which in turn drives up inflation. Now, another important factor is the extreme weather conditions causing damage to infrastructure such as roads, power lines, disrupting supply chains, and then again driving up costs. There is also the question of productivity. Now, if we take a look back at India's history, the Green Revolution, which started during the 60s and 70s, did help make India self-sufficient. But the same revolution also had unintended consequences, the high requirements of energy and water, the over-dependence on fertilizers and the fixation on only certain types of crops that have had a detrimental effect on, and it's all a vicious cycle. But there are also solutions. This is where sustainable agriculture comes in. Sustainable agriculture, in a nutshell, focuses on practices that promote long-term food and livestock production while also protecting the environment around us. There are many components to sustainable agriculture, and there are many different types of sustainable agriculture. So what are these different components and practices? How can they be implemented? What are the challenges and what is the future of agriculture in India? These are the questions we'll be asking our panelists on the show today. So I'd like to introduce our panel. Thank you so much for coming in. Abhishek Jain, Fellow and Director, Powering Livelihoods. Aparna Rajagopal, Owner, Bijom Farms. And Dr. G.V. Ramaja Nailu, or Dr. Ramu, agricultural scientist with a specialization in agroecology, organic natural farming and public policy at the Center for Sustainable Agriculture. Thank you so much all for being on the show with us today. And, I'd like to start with you, Abhishek, if you could, when we talk about sustainable agriculture, how important is this, especially now that the focus is so much on climate change and our future and on reducing, temperatures and not contributing to the heating of the planet?
I mean, the importance cannot be overstated. We are in a world where our agriculture yields are getting compromised because of rising temperatures. There are more droughts coming in, there are more floods coming in. And we know that how important is the natural climate to agriculture. It's the largest single input. I mean, we think of land, we think of water, but it is the climate around within which the crops thrive. So with changing climate, not focusing on how that climate is going to impact our agriculture, it will be the single biggest oversight that we can have. And we know that how critical is food. While agriculture from a GDP perspective, we can say that, okay, it only contributes 15 to 17%, but without that food, you cannot do anything else, be it the manufacturing sector, be it the service sector. So it drives the rest of the economy, and of course it drives the overall well-being of the human life on this planet. So sustainable agriculture in that context plays an important role. It helps you relook at how you're growing food, so that it is not just sustainable in terms of the nutritional security of the people, but it is also sustainable for the livelihood security of the farmers, as well as is secure for the ecology as a whole. And that's the three-way connect which we have kind of lost. We are only focusing on productivity or only focusing on just the production, but sort of missing this point that it has to be resilient for those who are producing it, producers. It has to be resilient for the nature, and the nature has to regenerate itself in the process as it provides us the food.
Parna, if you could, tell us a bit about where the consumer and society can come in, and there's obviously a need to create more awareness. Obviously through this show, that's one of the attempts we're making, but what can society and me as a consumer or the young students here as consumers, what can they do to support sustainable agriculture?
I think we see agriculture as a rural problem. Yes. And we most often miss the connect that is there between food and people. It's just about food and people. There's nothing rural or urban about this issue. It's just a problem. To begin with, we should introduce food and farming and these conversations at school level. It should not be just as at a policy level. I think these narratives should come very early. Teaching it as a subject in schools or colleges. Every college canteen should become conscious about its food. Every hospital should serve very, clean food and good food. Unless these narratives are built very early into our system, it's very difficult to bring that consumer, an aware consumer, to the table. And then, of course, the constant narratives like this. Fortunately, the phone...
So there is a lot of talk about health when it comes to health, and people talk about organic, etc. But here we're talking about, as a consumer, being responsible for the type of food that we are
to be aware of what
buying.
food it is. Like today, millets is a subject that everyone is talking about. But because everybody is so used to eating refined grains and food, and that's what is usually available outside, to suddenly change your palate to millets, there is a challenge. But if this were available from the start, then it need not be a challenge, really speaking. Food should become a conversation, because you're right, it's the 3 meals on your table, and that's why we educate ourselves. So that's why we are all doing what we do. So.
Right. Dr. Ramu, if you could also, tell us more about sustainable agriculture, and what role is our current food system playing in environment degradation?
Agriculture is largely dependent on the natural resources and the environment. The way we practice agriculture, the kind of crops we grow also has an impact on environment. And today, if you look at climate change, nearly about 19 to 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions are contributed by agriculture. Agriculture not only gets affected by the climate change, but also is contributing for the climate change. Second, the natural resources in terms of soil, in terms of water and biodiversity, all are getting degraded. The groundwater levels have degraded significantly, have gone down so much. In areas like Punjab and Haryana, probably it is the lowest on earth, the groundwater levels. Similarly, if you look at states like Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, etc., they're all getting dried up, and then we are in Maharashtra, we have to send a train of tankers water when Latur drought happened a couple of years back. Data shows that nearly 30% of the soils in India are degraded and not fit for cultivation of crops. This is all because of the bad practices. So how to move away from these bad practices towards better practices where we can conserve the natural resources without harming them, and then also adapt to the changing climate. These two is the biggest challenge food system is facing today. And in that, sustainable agriculture, organic and natural farming, permaculture, we may call it by various names, but putting together, it's about agriculture which uses less of water, less of energy, less of chemicals, which is required. And how that transition can happen will be the future of food systems in India. Second important issue is the consumers, by way of their purchasing behavior, not only determine their own health, but also determine the way agriculture happens, and thereby what happens to climate and natural resources over there.
Right. So clearly a need for more awareness and consumers to be aware. Abhishek, if you could, what do you feel the government and policy makers, authorities can do? What are these certain steps that need to be taken today when we talk about sustainable agriculture?
Yeah, when it comes to government, of course, they play an important role in shaping both the choices of the farmers as well as the choices of the consumers. So let me first talk about how they're shaping the choices of the farmer and what can they do. We know that fertilizer subsidy in this country is upwards of 2 lakh crore Indian rupees every year. Now, that's a huge amount of exchequer money.
We also know it's a big political issue.
Yeah, so that's a huge amount of exchequer money that is going out. Now, can we repurpose that money, still going to the farmers, but in a way that it gives farmer the choice whether they want to put the chemical fertilizer or they want to put the organic inputs into the farm. So instead of linking it to a kind of input, let's give the choice to the farmer. Similarly, we have almost 1.4 lakh crore worth of overall agriculture budget, which doesn't include this fertilizer subsidy, by the way. Now, that amount is also has a huge leverage in terms of how you are using it to support sustainable agriculture vis-a-vis the conventional agriculture. If you look at some of the government initiatives, and government has been looking at sustainable agriculture, it's not that they are not, but the amount of budgetary support is pretty small. We are talking about 1,000 crore going to sustainable agriculture in the form of National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture or National Mission on Natural Farming. But in comparison, we have this 1.4 lakh crore which is going into the conventional agriculture support. So how do we rejig some of this support still going to the farmers, but giving farmers the choice that they can actually use organic inputs, bio inputs, rather than necessarily pesticides or herbicides. Then farmers need hand-holding. You need to create cadres of community resource people. You need to sensitize and capacitate your agri-extension workers so that they can work with the farmers to handhold them in this transition. In the last 50, 60 years, we have been used to a certain way of agriculture. It is all input intensive, whether it is water, whether it is fertilizers, whether it is pesticides. If you now want to change it to a knowledge intensive agriculture, because this sustainable agriculture needs a lot of capacity building of the farmers. You need to create a capacity ecosystem around farmers. How do you recognize champion farmers? It's not that these things are not happening. Almost in every district of India, you can find a few champion farmers who are creating amazing success stories.
That's right. In fact, here at NDTV as well, we've occasionally focused on them, done reports on how they're making a difference in their particular field. But yes, some government, recognition and promotion. Aparna, as somebody who has a farm, what else do you think can be done? How can we use technology, startups? This is really talked about to help boost our farmers and farming practices.
I think technology can be a great tool. Mostly because everybody today has a mobile in their hand. So fortunately, because of that, I think we can we can create more apps that could help farmers determine better weather, precisely how the weather is going to function in the next few days, or even with sales and marketing and setting up cooperatives. That apart, it can be used for dissemination of very good information, which people are very receptive to. A particular region can have a lot of information on a particular crop or a way of value addition or ideas of how a crop can be grown more effectively. And he's right, there are a lot of lovely champion farmers.
Before we slip into a short break, we'll come back and talk more about this, and I'll go across to Dr. Ramu as well. But in the audience, if there are any questions so far on what we've been discussing or any issue that you want to raise. Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, you talked about pesticides, we should reduce the use of pesticides. Like states like Punjab has seen a increase in the number of cancer cases because of that. So what do you think is a good substitute to we can use instead of pesticide, because pests are also a very big problem in farming?
Yes, they're a huge problem. In fact, can I go across to Dr. Ramu for that? If you'd like to take that question when we talk about, pesticides and overuse of pesticides. Yes, it's very true. In Punjab, you have these, cancer has increased. You have these trains which carry cancer patients for treatment. It's terrible to see that, and it's not focused on enough. So, but what are the alternatives?
One of the major problems for the pests for increasing is the way agriculture is done. Large areas and rice and wheat, and heavy use of agrochemicals, particularly the fertilizer use, this increases the pest incidence. But if we can take up practices where we can reduce the fertilizer use and also have diverse crops and then take preventive care, the incidence of pests will come down. If you don't have water stagnation around your house, you will not have mosquito problem. Mosquitoes breed in the stagnant water. And without avoiding the stagnant water, if you want to control mosquitoes by spraying chemicals, or if you want to use this all mosquito repellents at home, it will poison your entire home and yourself. So the same thing is happening in agriculture also. Preventive cares can be taken, which minimizes the incidents, and farmers can also have timely advisory services where they can identify pests in advance. So now technologies are available where we can identify the pest incidents 10 to 15 days before. After all, doing all these, if there is a pest incidence, there are botanicals which can be used. There are a number of plants, trees, where we can make extracts and then use them. Say, for example, neem has a lot of pesticidal properties, and that can be used, and which is very harmless. Similarly, there is a chrysanthemum which we use regularly as flowers, but it leaves have a very good pesticide property. Similarly, there are a number of plants, and natural products degrade quickly. So when the natural products degrade quickly, they will not have any toxic effect on the food. Whereas the chemical pesticides degrade very late, and it takes years to degrade. And the remaining components of the pesticides also cause a lot of harm.
I think it begins with soil health. It has really helped us. We've worked on our soil a lot, and when soil is good, it builds immunity. And then also understanding and observing nature to see when what pest comes. Like Sir said, using botanicals For a few years, you have to use botanicals, and once you do a lot of diverse cropping, then slowly the whole ecosystem is built, and your necessity to use those botanicals also reduces, and gradually you create a system. So it's called integrated pest management.
All right, so a lot of questions there. We'll slip into a short break and come back with more on this discussion on sustainable agriculture. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the Great Climate Change Challenge, and today we're talking about sustainable agriculture as well as climate change and how we can improve our practices so to do the least amount of damage to the environment. And we have with us our panel and audience of students who have several questions. In the first segment, we were talking a lot about the various issues involved, and now you have questions. Yes, go ahead.
Ma'am, how can we convince farmers to less use or no use for the chemical-based pesticides?
Before this we spoke about the various options, but it all sounds a little expensive, and as far as we know, agriculture in India is very cost sensitive. So how can we overcome that and make this something that the farmers feel is worth their while?
So to understand this, you also need to understand the challenges that you have at the ground, and this is my experience where I've been working. You need availability of organic seeds. You need availability of these kind of inputs, training. It's a combination of factors. I think if you train them, motivate them, and you need model farms, like I consider myself a small model farm project there.
Right.
And I would love to interact with farmers of my region and motivate them to say that this works. And honestly, when we do grow a crop without pesticides or chemical fertilizers, they are shocked because we've gotten so used to believing that you need to manipulate soil.
Yeah, there's also a little manipulation by corporates and the seed providers and the type, because we know it's something I've reported on extensively. Yes, go ahead with your question.
And my question is related to what you previously mentioned, the millet farming. One of the key aspects that I see which discourages me to eat or consume millet is because there are hardly few any dishes that uses millet as its main food grain.
That's a very, very important point, because this is the year of the millet, and we've been talking so much, our Prime Minister has been talking so much about millets, but we really need to see it more. Abhishek, I'd like to, ask him to answer this, because, we all have cornflakes in the morning, we have dalia, we need to make it a cereal that, you have it every morning, the way we had that ad about anda, roast cow anda, remember when we were growing up those years, we need something like that about millets so that everybody feels like millets is that superfood that they need to eat, and it's good for the planet.
I'm glad you're asking me, because in the last 4 years, we have introduced millets a lot in our diet at home. Today morning, I had millets for my breakfast. So this happens at least 4 times in a week, and we have substituted rice by a large way with millets. So foxtail millets, little millets are a great substitute for rice. You have chana with millets, you have rajma with millets, and that is happening. It's first-hand experience that I'm sharing. And there are now very interesting recipe books that are coming. There are a lot of traditional recipes that have been around. I, in fact, have a 1-year-old who eats millets every third day as his breakfast. Now, all of these have been there. It's just that we have lost it over time. And social media influencers, chefs can play a huge role in reviving this. Why not a master chef?
Yes.
Be focused on millets altogether.
Yes.
Right?
I'm hearing all kinds of things about diabetes and weight management. So the millets are actually proving very beneficial for your health. It's something we've forgotten. As we progress, we just all go on to wheat and rice and breads and burgers and, and then it affects the health. Yes, any other questions?
I wanted to touch on the topic that Dr. Rama also mentioned, that there's like a water shortage in states like Telangana and Tamil Nadu, where the staple is rice. So paddy is a very water consuming crop. So how do staples in certain belts affect the kind of fertilizer or pesticides that are required? Like if the nutrient requirement goes down for a certain staple in that place, is crop rotation the answer, or how do we combat that?
There's an excessive focus on rice and wheat in the country. So government procures only rice, government supports only rice production. So obviously more farmers will be shifting towards rice. And what people forget is for producing a kg of rice, it takes about 5,000 liters of water. Practically a tanker of water. 1 tanker of water for every kg of rice. So if you are consuming 1 kg of rice in your family, 3 of you are consuming a kg of rice from morning to evening, it's a tanker of water you are consuming. And imagine a tanker of water, how many days you use for your domestic purpose. Second, when the water stagnation happens in the paddy production, there's a lot of methane emission happens, and with the chemical fertilizer, nitrous oxide emissions are also happening. So there's a lot of impact on climate because of this nitrous oxide emissions and methane emissions from the rice production. Within the rice production, we can shift towards practices which uses less of water. There is a system of rice intensification, there is an alternate wetting and drying, several kind of practices which can be promoted. Similarly, we can also have substitutes like instead of rice, we can have any of the millets which can do the same function, and in fact the digestibility of millets is much slower, so you don't need to eat as much as we eat rice. That way your consumption also goes down. So these transitions are possible. But what is happening is that government supports only rice, but it asks farmers to change over to millets. Government procures rice and distributes rice in the public distribution system, but it will ask consumers to shift towards millets, which is not going to happen. So the public policy has to change in terms of supporting the alternative models of production and alternative models of consumption. And one important issue also is about being in Delhi. All of you must be knowing, every winter you get caught in the air pollution, and that is all because of the rice wheat cropping
Dr. Ramu,
system.
for that I'll need a whole different show, and the Supreme Court too has said there needs to be a shift in that, but I'm completely out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, and the panelists as well as the audience, and clearly this is something all of us need to focus more on. Each one of us can make a difference when we think about, the food on our table and where it's come from. There needs to be a more focus on sustainable agriculture. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.